This is the story of something that actually happened. I am going to tell you about a night I can never forget. It still sends chills down my spine every time I think about it. It started like any normal day, but it ended with something I can't fully explain, something real and terrifying. So listen carefully. I'm not making anything up. This is a true scary story. It happened about 5 years ago. I was staying with my cousin Sam in a small town in Pennsylvania. His house was old, built in the 1800s, creaky floors, strange cold spots and all that. But I never believed in ghosts or anything supernatural. To me, it was just an old house with character. Sam, though, always said weird stuff happened there. Doors opening on their own, lights flickering, whispers at night. I thought he was just trying to scare me. You know how people are. One weekend, Sam and his parents had to leave for a family emergency. I offered to stay back and house sit. I liked the quiet anyway, and I had a few days off from work. They left that Friday morning, and I had the place to myself. The first night was peaceful. I watched a movie, ate leftover pizza, and went to bed around midnight. It was quiet outside, just the wind in the trees. Around 3:12 a.m., I remember looking at the clock because something had woken me up. A noise. It was like someone was walking in the hallway. Not fast, slow, steady steps. I froze in bed listening. At first I thought maybe I was dreaming, but then I heard it again, closer this time. Now Sam's house has wooden floors, and when someone walks they creak. These steps creaked exactly like that. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and walked out into the hallway. Nobody. I checked all the rooms upstairs. Empty. All the doors and windows were locked too. I convinced myself it was the house settling or maybe the wind. I went back to bed. But the next night things got worse. I was in the living room, reading a book. Around 10 p.m., I heard a knock at the front door. It wasn't loud, just a soft knock, 3 times. I thought it might be a neighbor. But when I opened the door, nobody was there. I stepped outside, looked around. Nothing. It was cold, dead silent, not even crickets. I went back inside, locking the door this time. An hour later, the knocking returned. This time it was at the back door. Now I was getting scared. The back door opened to the kitchen and there were no lights back there, just darkness beyond the windows. I stood still and listened. Knock. 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 I grabbed a kitchen knife. Yeah, I know how that sounds. And opened the back door fast, hoping to catch whoever was messing with me. But again, no one. Just the same silence. I checked the yard with a flashlight. Empty. I didn't sleep much that night. The third night. That's when it got real. I had turned off all the lights and was trying to sleep. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard the sound of breathing. It wasn't mine. It was raspy and low, like someone with a bad throat, and it was close. Too close. I opened my eyes and just stared into the dark. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to look. Then, the blanket moved. Not like it slid off the bed. No, it lifted. Like someone had grabbed the corner of it and raised it slowly. I swear I felt it tug away from my feet. I jumped up and turned the light on. Nobody. But the blanket was on the floor. I didn't care anymore about being polite or brave. I called Sam and told him I was leaving. He told me to wait till morning, said the roads were icy, but I couldn't stay. I packed a bag, took the flashlight, and got in my car. As I was driving away, I looked in the rearview mirror, and I wish I hadn't. There was someone standing in the upstairs window watching me. A tall figure, just standing there, not moving. Sam's house was completely empty. I was supposed to be the only one there. I know what I saw. I kept driving. I didn't stop until I got back to my own apartment, 2 hours away. Later, Sam told me something that messed with my head even more. He said that a long time ago, before his family bought the house, an old man lived there alone. He was strange, never spoke to anyone, always seen walking around late at night. One day, he just disappeared. People said he died in the house and his body wasn't found for weeks. When they finally found him, he was in the upstairs bedroom, Sam's room. He was lying on the floor with his eyes open, staring at the door, like he was waiting for someone to come in. Ever since then, the house had a bad vibe. Sam admitted he never slept well there, always felt like someone was watching him, especially from the hallway. And sometimes, he said he even saw the man. I never stayed at that house again, and I don't know if it was a ghost or something else, but I know what I felt. The breathing, the knocking, the figure in the window. It wasn't just in my head. People like to say they don't believe in ghosts until something happens to them. I used to be one of those people. Now, I leave lights on at night, and I never ignore strange sounds, ever again. So if you ever get the chance to stay in an old house, especially one with stories behind it, maybe just say no. Because some houses don't want to be alone. Some houses remember, and some don't like when strangers sleep inside. This is the story of something that happened to my friend Ethan. I'm going to tell you exactly how he told it to me. And trust me, you'll want to keep listening. It's not one of those made-up ghost tales. This one is real. It happened to someone I know. And after hearing it, I couldn't sleep right for days. Ethan had just turned 24 when it all began. He'd recently moved into a small rental house outside of Denver. It was cheap, had 2 bedrooms, and sat quietly near the edge of some woods. Nothing fancy, but perfect for him. He was trying to save money, and the house was old but cozy. At first, everything seemed fine. A few creaky floorboards, a strange draft in the hallway, but nothing weird enough to worry about. That changed during the second week. One night, Ethan was sitting in bed watching a movie on his laptop. Around 1 a.m., he heard a loud bang from the kitchen, like something fell. He jumped out of bed and rushed out, expecting maybe one of the old shelves collapsed. But nothing was out of place. Every dish, every chair, everything was normal. He laughed it off, thinking maybe something shifted and fell back into place. But then it happened again, the next night, and the night after that. Always around 1 a.m., always from the kitchen. By the 4th night, he decided to try something. He set his phone to record audio while he slept, left it on the table facing the kitchen. The next morning, he listened back, and he heard it, not just the bang, but footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps, walking from the kitchen to the hallway, stopping right outside his bedroom door. Then silence. He didn't want to believe it. He tried to tell himself it was a weird echo, or maybe a neighbor outside, but deep down, he knew better. That wasn't the house settling. That was someone or something inside. Still, he stayed. He wasn't the type to scare easy. But then things got darker. One morning he woke up and found muddy footprints in the hallway. They led from the kitchen, down the hall, and stopped right at his bedroom door. He stared at them for a long time. They looked like they were from bare feet. Wide, long toes. Definitely not his. He checked every door and window, all locked. No signs of a break-in. But something, or someone, had been walking through his house while he slept. That night, he locked his bedroom door. He pushed a chair against it too. Just in case, and again at 1 a.m. he heard it. Bang, followed by footsteps. He held his breath. The steps came down the hallway, slower than before, stopping at his door. Then the handle started turning. He stared at the door, heart racing. The chair shook slightly. The knob twisted again, harder this time. Then silence. He didn't sleep. When morning came, he opened the door slowly. No one was there. But this time, he noticed something new. Scratches. On the outside of the door, right by the handle. Deep ones, like someone dragged their fingernails across the wood, over and over. Ethan had enough. He called his landlord, told him something strange was going on. The landlord paused for a long time, then said, "You're not the first person to tell me that." Apparently, the last 2 renters left without giving much notice. One didn't even ask for his deposit back. Just left a note saying, "Sorry, I can't stay here. It's not safe." The landlord never told Ethan. Said he thought it was just paranoia. But Ethan knew better. He started doing research, looked up the address, and what he found made his stomach turn. Back in 1987, a man named Roger Hale lived in that house. He was quiet, didn't talk to neighbors much. People said he would go into the woods every night, carrying strange things, animal bones, jars, candles. Then, one day, he vanished. When police searched the house, they found symbols drawn under the floorboards, weird carvings behind the wallpaper, the kind of stuff you only see in horror movies. The case was never solved. Ethan packed a bag that day. He went to stay with his sister Emma for a while, but even there, it followed him. One night, Emma heard banging from the guest room. She found Ethan standing in the middle of the room, eyes wide, sweating. He didn't remember getting up, but the same muddy footprints were there, across her hallway. He'd brought it with him. Desperate, Ethan called a local paranormal investigator named Grace. She came to Emma's house 2 days later. An older woman with gray streaks in her hair and the calmest voice he'd ever heard. She listened, nodded, and said, "It's attached to you now, not the house." Ethan asked how that was possible. She explained, "Some spirits don't stay in places. They stay with people, especially if you disturb something they consider theirs. Did you touch anything in that house? Move anything unusual?" And then Ethan remembered. The night before the noises started, he found a small wooden box tucked behind the cabinet under the sink. It was sealed shut, strange carvings on the outside. He didn't open it, just moved it to the garage. Grace told him to burn it. Ethan went back the next day. He didn't even go inside. He opened the garage, grabbed the box, and set it on fire outside in the dirt. The flames turned green for a second, and for a moment, he thought he heard a scream. Not loud, but faint, like it was coming from far away. After that night, the banging stopped. The footprints never appeared again. Ethan moved in with a friend for a few months while looking for a new place. He's okay now, but he never stays anywhere alone. He never lives near the woods, and he never, ever touches things he finds in old houses. You know, I've seen Ethan after all this. He's different, always watching shadows, always double-checking locks. He jokes about it sometimes, but the look in his eyes when he tells the story, that's real fear. The kind you don't fake. So if you ever rent an old place and you find something strange, anything that feels wrong, just leave it alone. Don't be curious. Don't try to explain it away, because some things don't want to be disturbed. And if you wake them up, they might follow you too. This is the story of something that happened to a girl named Lauren. I'm going to tell you exactly how she told it to me, every detail. It's the kind of story that makes you look over your shoulder, even when you know you're alone. So listen closely. It's a true scary story, and once you hear it, you'll never forget it. Lauren was 22 when it happened. She had just finished college and moved into a small apartment in Manchester to start her new job. It wasn't anything fancy, just a studio on the third floor of an old brick building. It had creaky floors, peeling paint, and windows that let in way too much cold air. But it was hers, and she loved it. The first couple of weeks were normal. She was busy getting used to work, buying furniture, and settling in. But after a while, she started to notice strange things. It began small, like lights flickering for no reason, or waking up to find the TV on even though she was sure she'd turned it off before going to bed. One night, she came home and found her bathroom mirror covered in steam, like someone had just taken a hot shower, but she'd been gone all day and the apartment had been locked. She stood there staring at it, heart thumping in her chest. She checked every room. Nothing. No sign of a break-in. Still, she tried to ignore it. Maybe it was a pipe issue or something with the building. She didn't want to seem crazy, but then it got worse. Lauren started hearing whispers. Late at night, just as she was drifting off to sleep, she'd hear them. Faint, like they were coming from the walls. She couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like someone murmuring just out of reach. She'd sit up, hold her breath, but it would stop. The moment she lay back down, it would start again. She told her friend Adam about it. He laughed at first, said it was probably neighbors or bad insulation. But Lauren knew what she heard, and it wasn't coming from next door. It was inside her apartment. One night around 2 a.m., she woke up to a loud crash. She ran out of bed and found all the kitchen cabinets wide open. Every single one. Dishes scattered across the floor. She hadn't had an earthquake. No one could have done it. She was alone. That night she didn't sleep at all. She sat in the corner of the room, blanket around her, shaking. The next day she called the building manager, Mr. Cartwright. He was an older man who'd managed the place for years. She asked him if anyone else had complained about strange things. At first he said no, but then he paused, took off his glasses, and quietly said, "Apartment 3B has a bit of history." Lauren asked him what he meant. He hesitated, then said, "In the 70s, a girl your age lived there. Her name was Emily. One day she just stopped showing up to work. When the landlord opened the door, they found her, sitting in the corner, rocking back and forth. She wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat. She was taken to a hospital and never came back. Lauren felt cold all over. She asked what happened to Emily. Mr. Cartwright just shook his head and said, "Some say she saw something in there, or maybe something saw her." That night, Lauren couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. She stayed up, lights on, watching the shadows. Around 3 a.m., she heard something from the bathroom. Not a whisper this time. A low groan, like someone breathing heavily. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight, walked slowly toward the bathroom. The door was closed. She hadn't closed it. With a trembling hand, she pushed it open. Nothing, except the mirror. It wasn't foggy this time, but there was something on it. A word. Stay. She stepped back, heart pounding. She grabbed her keys, threw on a coat, and left the apartment. She spent the night at Adam's place, refusing to go back until morning. Adam didn't really believe her. He thought maybe she wrote it herself while half asleep. Sleepwalking, maybe. But Lauren knew the truth. She knew she was being watched. Still, she couldn't afford to break her lease. So she went back. But now, every night, the whispers were louder. The lights would flicker constantly. The mirror would fog up even when she hadn't used hot water, and the word kept changing. One night it said, "Mine." Another night, "Leave." It was like something couldn't decide what it wanted from her. The final night was the worst. Lauren had started sleeping with the lights on, but that night, the power went out. Total darkness. Not just her room, the entire building. She lit a candle and sat on her bed, waiting for the power to come back. But then she heard the sound again, breathing, right behind her. She spun around, heart racing. But there was nothing. Just the candlelight flickering. Then the mirror in her closet door cracked. A thin line right down the center, like something had slammed into it from the inside. Lauren screamed and ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. It was locked from the inside. She didn't even have a lock on it. She turned back and saw it. A figure in the mirror. Not her reflection. Something else. Tall. Thin. Shadowed. Its eyes were pure black, and it was smiling. It didn't move, just stared at her through the glass. She backed away, holding the candle in shaking hands, whispering, "Please stop, please." Then everything went black. The candle went out. The power was still off. And in the silence, she heard a voice, right next to her ear. "She let me in. Now you did too." When Lauren woke up, it was morning. She was lying on the floor. Everything was quiet. The door was unlocked. The mirror was whole again. No cracks, no figure, nothing. But the word on the bathroom mirror, "Thank you." She moved out that day. To this day, Lauren doesn't know what it was. A spirit? A demon? Something even older? All she knows is this. When you live somewhere and things don't feel right, don't stay. Something may be watching. And if it decides you're the one it wants, it won't let go. This is the story of a man named Jack, and it's something he still can't explain, even after all these years. He never liked talking about it, but when he told me, I could see the fear in his eyes. Fear that never quite left him, even now. So, if you're brave enough, sit back and listen closely, because what happened to Jack was nothing short of terrifying. This is the true story of how he came face to face with something no one should ever meet. Jack had just moved into a new flat in a quiet part of Leeds. It was an old building, 4 stories high, with thick walls that seemed to swallow up all sound. The kind of place you could get lost in if you weren't careful. He was in his late 20s, working a regular office job and looking for a place to call home. When he saw the flat, it seemed perfect. Cheap rent, a nice enough neighborhood, and the promise of peace and quiet. He didn't think much about it. He was too focused on settling in. The first week was uneventful. Jack unpacked his things, went to work, and got used to his new routine. But after about a week, things started to change. It started with the noises. At first, he thought it was just the building settling, the old pipes groaning, or maybe the neighbors. But as the days went by, the sounds became harder to ignore. It was always the same. Late at night, just as he was about to fall asleep, he'd hear it. A soft tapping sound, like fingers tapping against the walls. At first it was quiet, almost like a whisper. But as the nights passed, the tapping grew louder. It was coming from inside the walls, echoing through the apartment. Jack tried to dismiss it. He told himself it was just the house settling. Old buildings did that, right? But deep down, he knew something wasn't quite right. Then came the shadows. One evening, Jack was sitting on the couch, reading a book, when he noticed a figure out of the corner of his eye. He looked up, expecting to see a person, or maybe something, outside the window, but there was nothing. He turned his attention back to the page, but as he did, he saw it again. A shadow moving quickly across the room just out of his sight. He jumped up, heart pounding, but again, nothing. Just the dim light of the room. Over the next few nights, it happened again. The shadow would appear, darting across his peripheral vision, always just out of reach. Sometimes it would seem to be standing still, as though watching him. Jack told himself it was his mind playing tricks on him. He hadn't slept much, and stress at work was starting to get to him. But still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was there. Things took a darker turn one Saturday evening. Jack had been working on a project at home, and it was getting late. He'd ordered takeout and was sitting at the kitchen table, eating, when he heard a loud bang from the hallway. It was so sudden and jarring that he almost dropped his food. He stood up, heart racing, and went to check it out. There, in the hallway, was a picture frame lying face down on the floor. It had been hanging on the wall for days, untouched. Jack knelt to pick it up, confused. He hadn't heard anything fall, but there it was, shattered. The photo inside the frame wasn't broken, but as Jack stared at it, something made his stomach twist. The face in the photo, a smiling woman, seemed different. Her eyes, those wide, blank eyes, stared back at him, unsettling and unnatural. He quickly set the frame down, a chill running down his spine. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept hearing the tapping again, louder than ever, coming from the walls. Then the shadow appeared, more defined this time, lingering at the edge of his vision. But it wasn't just the tapping or the shadows anymore. Jack began to notice something even stranger. His belongings were starting to move on their own. At first, it was small things. A cup would be moved slightly off-center on the kitchen counter. His keys would be in a different spot than where he left them, but it escalated quickly. One morning, Jack woke up to find that his front door was wide open. He was sure he had locked it the night before, but there it was, swinging in the breeze, the lock still intact. He checked the entire apartment for signs of a break-in, but there was nothing. No signs of forced entry, no signs of anyone coming inside. That's when Jack realized something. He wasn't alone in the flat. He tried to reach out for help. First, calling the landlord. The landlord, an old man named Mr. Gallagher, didn't seem surprised when Jack mentioned the noises. In fact, Mr. Gallagher's response was strange. "I should have told you before," he said. "This building has a history. People have lived there before you and they've disappeared. Most leave, but some just vanish." Jack pressed him for more details, but Mr. Gallagher just muttered something about old tenants and not being able to leave. The landlord was quick to hang up, leaving Jack feeling more confused than ever. The final straw came one night, when Jack came home late after a long day at work. As he stepped into the hallway, he felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. The air felt thick, heavy. He turned to his right and froze. There, standing at the end of the hall, was a figure, a woman. Her back was turned, but Jack could see her dark, tangled hair. She didn't move. She just stood there, perfectly still. "Hello?" Jack called out, his voice barely a whisper. The woman didn't respond. She didn't even flinch. Jack took a cautious step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The woman finally turned to face him, and that's when Jack's blood ran cold. Her eyes were black, not just dark, but completely black. Empty. Her skin was pale, too pale, almost as if it had been drained of life. She stared at him with that vacant, hollow gaze, and Jack felt his legs buckle beneath him. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The woman didn't move. She just stared, unblinking, as if she was waiting for something. With everything he had, Jack bolted down the hallway, out the front door and into the street. He didn't stop running until he reached the nearest police station. When the police arrived at the apartment, they found it exactly as Jack had left it. Empty. No woman. No strange shadows. Nothing out of the ordinary. They searched the building, but found no signs of anyone living there. The place was eerily quiet. In the end, they chalked it up to stress and fear, advising Jack to find somewhere else to stay for a while. Jack never went back to that flat. He moved into a different place on the other side of town and never spoke about what happened again. But I know he still thinks about it sometimes, how he was never able to explain what he saw or why that building seemed to pull people in. And now, after hearing his story, you might wonder, what was it? Was it just his mind playing tricks on him? Or was it something much darker? All I know is there's a place in Leeds where people disappear, and sometimes things are better left unanswered. So, the next time you find yourself looking at an old flat or an abandoned house, remember Jack's story. You might not see it, but there are things out there, and sometimes they're just waiting for you to move in. This is the story of Sarah and what happened to her one winter night. She never believed in ghosts, never thought much about the strange things people said about haunted places. She always brushed it off as stories, tales spun by bored minds, with too much time on their hands. But after that night, she changed her view forever. So sit back and listen closely, because this is not just a story. This is something that happened to Sarah, and I promise you, it's one you won't forget. Sarah was a young woman, in her mid-20s, living in a small, cozy flat in a quiet village on the outskirts of Oxford. It was a lovely place, the kind of home you dream of when you're growing up. The rent was cheap, the neighbors were friendly, and there was a park just down the street. Life was simple for Sarah. She worked from home as a freelance writer and enjoyed the peace and solitude her little flat offered. But that winter was colder than usual, the kind of biting cold that made you want to stay inside under a thick blanket. Sarah loved it. She had the perfect excuse to stay in, sipping hot chocolate and working on her projects. But one evening, as the night fell and the wind howled outside, she started to feel something different. It began with an odd noise. At first, she thought it was the wind, rushing through the old windows of her flat. The place wasn't brand new, after all, but as she listened more closely, she realized it wasn't the wind. It was a soft thumping like footsteps, or perhaps a door creaking open and closed. The noise came from the ceiling above her. Sarah sat frozen on the couch, her pen hovering over the page as she stared up at the ceiling, listening. The noise stopped for a moment only to start again, a slow, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. Must be the neighbors, she muttered to herself, brushing it off. It was an old building, after all, and the noise was probably just the pipes or something settling. But as the evening wore on, the thumping didn't stop. It became louder, more distinct, as though someone was pacing back and forth above her. She tried to ignore it, pushing her work aside and picking up a book to distract herself. But the noise grew more persistent. It was almost as if someone was trying to get her attention. Finally, unable to focus any longer, Sarah grabbed her coat and headed upstairs to see if the neighbors were home. When she knocked on the door, there was no answer. The flat above hers was always quiet, the kind of place where no one seemed to come or go. Sarah felt a little silly, standing there in the cold, waiting for an answer that never came. She turned to leave, but as she did, she heard something. From inside the flat, a voice. Low and muffled, but unmistakably a voice. It sounded like someone whispering. Her heart skipped a beat. She knocked again, this time more urgently, but still, there was no response. Sarah turned and hurried back to her own flat, locking the door behind her. As she did, she glanced up at the ceiling, and that's when she saw it. A shadow. It moved, quickly across the ceiling, as if something was walking just above her. Sarah froze, her breath caught in her throat. It was impossible. She couldn't explain it, but there was no denying what she had just seen. A shadow that shouldn't have been there, moving without any visible cause. For the next few nights, the noises only grew worse. The thumping became more pronounced, echoing through the flat as if something or someone was moving around above her. And each night, Sarah saw the shadow again. It never came any closer, but it was always there, creeping across the ceiling, always just out of her reach. She tried to talk to the landlord about it, but he just brushed it off, telling her that the building was old and had its quirks. Probably the pipes or something, he said with a nervous laugh. But Sarah wasn't convinced. The noises were too real, too persistent, to be explained away so easily. She decided to do a little digging of her own. The next day, she went down to the local library, hoping to find some information about the history of the building. She spent hours searching through old records and newspapers. It wasn't until she came across an article from the 1940s that she found something unusual. The headline read, "Mysterious Disappearance in Oxford Village." The story told of A woman, a widow named Evelyn Richardson, who had lived in a flat in Sarah's building. According to the article, Evelyn had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only her belongings. Neighbors reported hearing strange noises coming from the flat in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, but no one knew what happened to her. The article was dated just a few years before Sarah moved into the building. She felt a chill run down her spine. Could this be connected to what was happening in her flat? That night, as Sarah sat in her living room, the noises started again. This time they were louder than before. The thumping echoed through the walls, rattling her nerves. But this time she didn't hesitate. She grabbed a flashlight and went up to the flat above hers, determined to get to the bottom of this. She knocked once more, but this time the door creaked open on its own. Her heart raced in her chest, but she stepped inside. The flat was dark, cold, and empty. There was no sign of anyone living there. But as Sarah moved further inside, she noticed something strange. There, on the wall, was an old, faded photograph of a woman. Evelyn Richardson, the same woman from the newspaper article. As she examined the photo more closely, she felt a cold breath on the back of her neck. Spinning around, she shone her flashlight into the corner of the room. And that's when she saw it. A figure, standing in the shadows. It was a woman, but not quite. Her features were distorted, her skin pale and sickly. Her eyes were wide and empty, staring right through Sarah. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The figure took a step forward, and Sarah felt an icy hand brush against her arm. Suddenly, the room grew cold, colder than it had ever been. Sarah turned and bolted for the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't stop running until she was back in her own flat, the door locked behind her. For the rest of the night, the thumping in the ceiling continued, but Sarah didn't move. She stayed in her bedroom, curled up under the covers, trying to block out the sounds. The next day, she called the landlord again, this time demanding answers. He seemed nervous on the phone, telling her that the building had a long history of strange occurrences. He had never mentioned it before, but he confessed that many tenants had complained about hearing noises and seeing things they couldn't explain. Some had left suddenly, others had simply disappeared. The landlord, trembling, told Sarah that the building might be cursed. That night, Sarah moved out. She couldn't stay in that flat any longer. The eerie noises and the woman's twisted figure had driven her out for good. She found a new place, far away from the village and the cursed building. But even now, years later, Sarah still remembers that night. The thumping, the shadow, and the woman who had been waiting for her in the dark. And though she never speaks about it, she knows one thing for sure. There are things in this world that we cannot explain. Things that linger in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. If you ever find yourself in that part of Oxford, you might just hear the faint sound of footsteps echoing through the walls. But whatever you do, don't look up, because you might just see someone looking back at you. This is the story of James, a man who didn't believe in ghosts, at least not until he experienced something that made him change his mind forever. It all started one evening when he moved into a new house, a house that had an unsettling history that James didn't know about. But by the time he realized what he had gotten himself into, it was already too late. So listen carefully, because this story isn't just a creepy tale. It's something that happened to someone, and it could happen to anyone. James was in his early 30s, a young professional who had just started his new job in a nearby town. After months of searching, he found the perfect house. It was an old Victorian-style cottage, tucked away on a quiet street at the edge of town. The house had everything he wanted: character, space, and a garden that he could make his own. Plus, the price was incredibly affordable, even for someone just starting out. The realtor, an older woman named Mrs. Thatcher, had been very eager to show him the property. She talked excitedly about the history of the house, mentioning how it had been built in the late 1800s and passed through several families over the years. But when James asked about any strange occurrences, she brushed it off quickly, saying it was a perfectly ordinary home. The first few nights in the house were peaceful, with James settling in and starting to make it his own. The house creaked. With age, of course, but he didn't mind. It had a charm about it, an atmosphere that felt like it had stories to tell. But there was something else, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. He couldn't help but feel as if he wasn't entirely alone. One evening, as he was unpacking boxes in the living room, James noticed a faint smell in the air, like old wood and something else, something musty. He paused for a moment, looking around the room. The air seemed heavier, colder, though the heater was on. He shrugged it off, thinking it was just the house settling, but the next night the atmosphere in the house grew even more uncomfortable. James was in his bedroom, lying in bed after a long day at work, when he heard it. The faint sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, like someone walking up the stairs. James froze. He had been alone all day, and there was no one else in the house. But the footsteps grew louder, unmistakable now, echoing through the silence of the night. His heart began to race. He stood up, grabbed his flashlight from the nightstand, and cautiously opened the door. The hallway was empty. No one was there. The air felt thick with tension, but everything appeared perfectly still. He checked every room, convinced that someone had broken in, but there was no sign of an intruder. He thought maybe it was just his mind playing tricks on him, and went back to bed trying to ignore the unease in his chest. But the next night, the footsteps came again. This time, they were louder and closer, as if someone was walking down the hallway toward his bedroom. James couldn't stay in bed. He had to know what was going on. With his heart pounding, he got out of bed and opened his door. This time he didn't have the flashlight. Instead, he walked into the hallway, slowly, quietly. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. He checked every room, again, convinced that someone was hiding somewhere, but there was no one, not a sound, not a movement. He was alone. The following day, James decided to visit Mrs. Thatcher. He had to ask her about the house's history. Something wasn't right, and he needed answers. When he arrived at her office, he was greeted with a friendly smile, but the moment he asked about the history of the house, her expression changed. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the side, and then she sighed. "I should have told you," she said, her voice low. "That house has a past. It belonged to a family, the Harrows, back in the late 1800s. The father, Thomas Harrow, was a well-known doctor, but his wife, Mary, she was never quite right. People said she had a gift that could see things that weren't there. But she also had a dark side. One night, she disappeared. The police searched for her, but she was never found. Some people say she left on her own. Others think she was taken by something else. James felt a shiver run down his spine. Taken by what? He asked, his voice shaking slightly. I don't know, Mrs. Thatcher replied. But strange things happened in that house after she vanished. People who lived there said they heard whispers, footsteps, even cries in the night. They said Mary's spirit never left. But nobody really knows for sure. James felt a chill grip him. He didn't want to believe in ghosts or spirits. He wasn't the superstitious type, but he couldn't deny the strange things happening in his house. The footsteps, the cold spots, the eerie atmosphere. That night, after his conversation with Mrs. Thatcher, James was on edge. He tried to shake off the feeling, telling himself it was just his imagination. But as the night wore on, the house seemed to grow colder, the air thicker, and then the footsteps started again. They were louder now, unmistakable. Someone was walking up the stairs, slow and deliberate. But this time they didn't stop. They continued, closer and closer, until they reached the door to his bedroom. James's heart raced in his chest as the door to his room creaked open on its own. He could see the faint outline of a figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the darkness. It was a woman. Her features were hard to make out, but her presence was overwhelming, chilling. She stood there watching him, her eyes wide and unblinking. "Who are you?" James whispered, his voice trembling. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it stepped closer, the cold air growing even more intense. James's legs shook, but he couldn't move. The figure reached out, her hand just inches from his face. He closed his eyes, bracing for whatever was about to happen. And then, nothing. The figure vanished. The cold air lifted, and the footsteps stopped. Everything went silent. James opened his eyes and looked around, but the room was empty. He wasn't sure if it was a dream, or if he had really seen her, but he didn't care. He knew what he had to do. The next day he packed up his things and left. He couldn't stay in that house any longer. The fear, the uncertainty, the presence that seemed to watch him, it was too much. He never returned to the house, and he never spoke of the woman in the doorway again. To this day, James lives in a different home, far away from the haunting of that old Victorian house. But sometimes when the night is still and quiet, he can't shake the feeling that someone is watching him, just out of sight. And every now and then, when the wind howls outside, he hears the faint sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, just like that night. If you ever find yourself in that town, near the edge of the village, there's a house that sits abandoned, hidden by overgrown ivy. It might look harmless, but I wouldn't go near it if I were you. Because some things, once they find you, never really let you go. This is the story of something real, something that still gives me chills when I think about it. I'm going to tell you a few true scary stories that I've either seen myself or heard from people who don't scare easy. These stories aren't about ghosts with chains or monsters under the bed. They're about things that happened in real life, and once you hear them, you might not sleep so well tonight. The first one happened to a friend of mine, Sam. He's not the type to make things up. He works night shifts at a 24-hour gas station in a small town. Not many people come by after midnight, and most nights are slow and boring. But one night, around 3 a.m., a car pulled up. A beat-up old car, nothing unusual, except it didn't make a sound, no engine noise, just rolled in and stopped. Sam was inside the store watching the cameras. He saw the car stop, but no one got out. He waited. Still, nothing. No door opened, no movement. Then the lights inside the car went off. That's when he started getting uneasy. He stepped out to take a look, thinking maybe someone passed out or needed help. When he got closer, he saw someone sitting in the driver's seat, but the person was just staring straight ahead, not blinking, not moving. Sam called out, "Hey, you all right?" No answer. He tapped on the window. Nothing. Then he noticed the man wasn't breathing. His eyes were wide open, but he looked dead. Sam ran back inside and called the police. When they came, they checked the car. No heartbeat. Cold body. The weird part? The police said the man had been dead for at least a day, but Sam saw the car drive in. He swore it. The security cameras, they glitched during those few minutes. Nothing was recorded. The second story is from my cousin, Leah. She's a nurse. She told me about this one patient. Old man. Very quiet. Came in for a fall, but something about him felt strange. Leah said he never blinked much, just watched people with these sharp, watery eyes. Never smiled, never spoke unless needed. One night, she was doing her rounds. She passed by his room and saw the door half open. The lights were off, which was odd because they're supposed to be on. She peeked in and saw him sitting up, even though he was supposed to be on bed rest. He was staring out the window, even though the curtains were shut. She walked in and asked if he needed anything. He turned to her slowly and whispered, "Don't look behind you." She froze. The room was dead silent. She thought maybe he was confused or dreaming. But he kept staring past her shoulder. "It's here again," he said. Leah turned around. Nothing there. But she swore she felt cold air brush past her cheek. The next morning, the old man was gone. His bed was perfectly made, no sign of discharge. No one saw him leave. She checked the hospital records later. The name he gave didn't exist. No one ever admitted him. Security footage, you guessed it, missing for that whole night. Now this next one, this happened to me. A few years ago, I rented this cheap apartment. Old building, creaky floors, but it was all I could afford. The neighbor next door was an older woman, kept to herself. I'd hear her talking sometimes through the thin walls, but I never saw anyone visiting. One night I came home late from work, tired, hungry, just wanted to sleep. As I was unlocking my door, I heard a soft knock on her door. Then I heard her voice saying, "Not now, sweetie. It's too late." I thought maybe she had a grandchild staying over or something. Didn't think much of it. That night around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of knocking. It wasn't on my door. It was on the wall behind my bed, the one that connected to her apartment. Knock, knock, knock. Slow and steady. I sat up, confused. Then I heard her voice again. "Stop that now. Go back to bed." Then silence. I tried to sleep again, thinking it was just some weird family thing. Next morning, I saw the landlord and asked if everything was okay with the lady next door. He looked confused. "There's no one next door," he said. "That apartment's been empty for 2 years. The lady who lived there, she passed away. No one's been in there since." I didn't believe him. I'd heard her voice. I'd heard her talking to someone. I asked him to open the place up. He did. The apartment was dusty, cobwebs, floor covered in dust. But what I saw in the corner made my stomach twist. A small child's handprint on the inside of the dusty window. After that, I moved out in a week. One more story. A short one, but the one that really sticks with me. This one comes from an old guy I met at a bar once. We got talking about weird things and he told me about something that happened to him back in the 80s. He was hiking in a remote forest somewhere up north. He went alone. Said he liked the quiet. First night was normal, but the second night, he woke up to the sound of singing. Not loud, just soft like a lullaby. He thought maybe it was the wind or birds, but then he realized it was in a language he didn't understand. He stepped out of his tent. The forest was pitch black. The singing got louder. Still soft, but now it felt close. He shined his flashlight around. Nothing. But when he turned off the light, he saw something. A face, pale and thin, watching him from behind a tree. The singing stopped. Then the face disappeared. He didn't sleep that night. At first light, he packed up and started hiking out. But every now and then, he'd hear small footsteps behind him. When he'd turn, there was no one there. He made it out of the forest by sundown. He swore he'd never go back, and he never did. You know, there are so many scary stories out there, not because people want to be scared, but because sometimes strange things really happen. Things we can't explain. Things that stay with you. Sometimes the dead don't. Stay quiet. Sometimes the forest watches you back. And sometimes you knock on a door, and something answers that shouldn't be there. So next time you hear a strange noise at night, or feel like someone's watching when no one's around, maybe don't check, maybe don't knock, and definitely don't answer. This is the story of something real, something that still gives me chills when I think about it. I'm going to tell you a few true scary stories that I've either seen myself or heard from people who don't scare easy. These stories aren't about ghosts with chains or monsters under the bed. They're about things that happened in real life, and once you hear them, you might not sleep so well tonight. The first one happened to a friend of mine, Sam. He's not the type to make things up. He works night shifts at a 24-hour gas station in a small town. Not many people come by after midnight, and most nights are slow and boring. But one night, around 3 a.m., a car pulled up. A beat-up old car, nothing unusual. Except it didn't make a sound. No engine noise. Just rolled in and stopped. Sam was inside the store watching the cameras. He saw the car stop, but no one got out. He waited. Still, nothing. No door opened. No movement. Then the lights inside the car went off. That's when he started getting uneasy. He stepped out to take a look, thinking maybe someone passed out or needed help. When he got closer, he saw someone sitting in the driver's seat. but the person was just staring straight ahead, not blinking, not moving. Sam called out, "Hey, you all right?" No answer. He tapped on the window. Nothing. Then he noticed the man wasn't breathing. His eyes were wide open, but he looked dead. Sam ran back inside and called the police. When they came, they checked the car. No heartbeat. Cold body. The weird part? The police said the man had been dead for at least a day, but Sam saw the car drive in. He swore it. The security cameras, they glitched during those few minutes. Nothing was recorded. The second story is from my cousin, Leah. She's a nurse. She told me about this one patient. Old man. Very quiet. Came in for a fall, but something about him felt strange. Leah said he never blinked much, just watched people with these sharp, watery eyes. Never smiled, never spoke unless needed. One night, she was doing her rounds. She passed by his room and saw the door half open. The lights were off, which was odd because they're supposed to be on. She peeked in and saw him sitting up, even though he was supposed to be on bed rest. He was staring out the window, even though the curtains were shut. She walked in and asked if he needed anything. He turned to her slowly and whispered, "Don't look behind you." She froze. The room was dead silent. She thought maybe he was confused or dreaming. But he kept staring past her shoulder. "It's here again," he said. Leah turned around. Nothing there. But she swore she felt cold air brush past her cheek. The next morning, the old man was gone. His bed was perfectly made, no sign of discharge. No one saw him leave. She checked the hospital records later. The name he gave didn't exist. No one ever admitted him. Security footage, you guessed it, missing for that whole night. Now this next one, this happened to me. A few years ago, I rented this cheap apartment. Old building, creaky floors, but it was all I could afford. The neighbor next door was an older woman, kept to herself. I'd hear her talking sometimes through the thin walls, but I never saw anyone visiting. One night I came home late from work, tired, hungry, just wanted to sleep. As I was unlocking my door, I heard a soft knock on her door. Then I heard her voice saying, "Not now, sweetie. It's too late." I thought maybe she had a grandchild staying over or something. Didn't think much of it. That night around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of knocking. It wasn't on my door. It was on the wall behind my bed, the one that connected to her apartment. Knock, knock, knock. Slow and steady. I sat up, confused. Then I heard her voice again. "Stop that now. Go back to bed." Then silence. I tried to sleep again, thinking it was just some weird family thing. Next morning, I saw the landlord and asked if everything was okay with the lady next door. He looked confused. "There's no one next door," he said. "That apartment's been empty for 2 years. The lady who lived there, she passed away. No one's been in there since." I didn't believe him. I'd heard her voice. I'd heard her talking to someone. I asked him to open the place up. He did. The apartment was dusty, cobwebs, floor covered in dust. But what I saw in the corner made my stomach twist. A small child's handprint on the inside of the dusty window. After that, I moved out in a week. One more story. A short one, but the one that really sticks with me. This one comes from an old guy I met at a bar once. We got talking about weird things and he told me about something that happened to him back in the 80s. He was hiking in a remote forest somewhere up north. He went alone. Said he liked the quiet. First night was normal, but the second night, he woke up to the sound of singing, not loud, just soft like a lullaby. He thought maybe it was the wind or birds, but then he realized it was in a language he didn't understand. He stepped out of his tent. The forest was pitch black. The singing got louder. Still soft, but now it felt close. He shined his flashlight around. Nothing. But when he turned off the light, he saw something. A face, pale and thin, watching him from behind a tree. The singing stopped. Then the face disappeared. He didn't sleep that night. At first light, he packed up and started hiking out. But every now and then, he'd hear small footsteps behind him. When he'd turn, there was no one there. He made it out of the forest by sundown. He swore he'd never go back, and he never did. You know, there are so many scary stories out there, not because people want to be scared, but because sometimes strange things really happen. Things we can't explain. Things that stay with you. Sometimes the dead don't. Stay quiet. Sometimes the forest watches you back. And sometimes you knock on a door, and something answers that shouldn't be there. So next time you hear a strange noise at night, or feel like someone's watching when no one's around, maybe don't check, maybe don't knock, and definitely don't answer. This is the story of a real event that happened to someone I know. I'm going to tell you what happened, just like it was told to me. No exaggeration, no horror movie nonsense. Just one of those moments that makes your skin crawl and your heart race. Something that makes you question what's real. I promise you, once you hear it, it will stay with you. It happened to my friend James. Back then he was 21. Working part-time at a bookstore and studying at a community college. He had just moved out of his parents' house and rented a small apartment on the edge of town. The place was old, but it was cheap and quiet. That's all he really wanted. He didn't care that the wallpaper peeled in the corners or that the floor creaked with every step. It was his own space. Freedom. The building had only 4 apartments. His was on the second floor, right above an old woman named Mrs. Patterson. She was quiet and kept to herself. James said he hardly ever saw her, just sometimes through her window when he came home. She always had the same lamp on, casting this soft yellow light. She never opened her curtains, not once. It was his 3rd week living there when the strange things started happening. The first thing was small. He came home one evening to find his kitchen faucet running. He didn't remember turning it on, but maybe he was in a rush that morning. He shrugged it off. The next night his closet light was on. He didn't even know there was a light in the closet. Still, he laughed it off. New place, unfamiliar quirks. Maybe he was just forgetful. But then one night, around 1:30 a.m., he was lying in bed when he heard knocking. Not loud, just 3 soft knocks. Knock, knock, knock. He thought someone was at his door, but when he got up and looked through the peephole, there was no one. He opened the door. Nothing. The hallway was empty. He closed the door and went back to bed, trying to convince himself it was the building settling or maybe pipes, but it happened again the next night. Same time. Same soft knocks. He didn't open the door that time. He just lay still and waited. He could hear the faint creak of the floor outside, like someone was standing just beyond the door. Then, after a few minutes, silence. The next morning, he decided to ask the old woman downstairs if she had heard anything. He knocked on her door, but no one answered. He even called the landlord, who told him something strange. "Mrs. Patterson passed away 2 weeks ago. Didn't I tell you that before you moved in?" James felt a chill run down his back. He swore he had seen her light on the night before. He swore he saw her silhouette, just like always. That night, James didn't sleep. He sat on his couch with all the lights on. The knocking didn't come, but just before dawn he saw something through his peephole. Someone was standing in the hallway. A woman. Pale. Thin. Wearing what looked like a hospital gown. She wasn't knocking this time. Just standing there. Her face turned toward his door, unmoving. James backed away from the peephole slowly, heart pounding. When he looked again, she was gone. He didn't tell anyone. He thought maybe he was overtired, stressed, imagining things. He tried to go on with his life. But something changed in the apartment after that. The air felt heavy, cold, like someone else was there with him. One night, while brushing his teeth, he saw her again. Not in person. In the bathroom mirror. She was behind him. Not close. Just in the corner of the room, standing near the doorway. He turned around so fast he knocked over a glass, shattering it on the sink, but the room was empty. He didn't sleep that night either. The worst night, the night he finally left that place for good, came 2 days later. It started the same. Late night. Quiet. He was sitting on his bed, watching something on his laptop. He heard the knocks again, but this time, they were inside the apartment. Not the door, not the wall, the closet. Knock, knock, knock. He froze. The closet was only a few feet away. The door was shut, but something tapped from inside it. Slow and steady. He stood up, not knowing whether to run or yell. He didn't move. He just stared at the closet, heart pounding. Then the doorknob began to turn, slowly, like someone was trying not to be heard. James didn't wait to see what came out. He ran. Out of the apartment, down the stairs, into the street. Didn't even take his phone or shoes, just ran. He called the landlord the next morning from a friend's house, told him he was breaking the lease. He didn't care about the money. When the landlord asked why, James said, "There's someone in the apartment." They went back together that afternoon to get James's stuff. The apartment was quiet, everything untouched, but the closet door was open, and inside, scratched into the wood, were 3 words: "Let me out." The closet had no lock, no way for someone to be inside and trapped, but the scratches were real, deep, angry. James moved back in with his parents for a while after that. He never really talked about it again unless someone asked. Even then he kept it short. He's fine now, married, has a house, kids. But sometimes he still wakes up at 1:30 in the morning, and he swears he hears those same 3 knocks. You know, the scariest part about true scary stories isn't the blood or ghosts or anything like that. It's the quiet stuff. The moments that don't make sense. When the world shifts just a little and lets something in that shouldn't be there. A knock when no one's around. A face in the mirror that vanishes. Or a neighbor who's already dead. And if one night you hear soft knocking at your closet, don't open it. Just wait. Maybe it'll go away. Or maybe it's been waiting for you. This is the story of a terrifying experience that happened to a friend of mine, Mark. He still remembers it as if it happened yesterday, even though it's been years. And when he told me, I could hear the fear in his voice. Something about this story makes you question the things that you think are safe, the places you think you know. It's a story about a night that changed everything for Mark. It all started when Mark moved into a new house. It wasn't the kind of place he thought would have any stories attached to it. Just a regular 2-story house on the edge of town, right next to the woods. The rent was reasonable, and the house was in decent condition. The first week, everything was normal. Quiet neighborhood, no strange noises, no creepy neighbors, just peace. But the strange occurrences began after Mark's first month. It started with small things he brushed off at first. One evening he came home to find the kitchen cabinet doors open. He was sure he had closed them before leaving. But that wasn't enough to make him worry. He figured maybe he'd forgotten. A few days later, he came home to an even stranger sight. The back door was wide open. Mark was sure he had locked it before leaving that morning. The wind could have blown it open, he thought. But when he checked, there were no signs of forced entry. The door was locked from the inside, and the latch was perfectly in place. After that, he started noticing other things. The temperature in the house would change without warning. It could be sweltering hot in one room and freezing cold in another. At night, he'd wake up to hear footsteps walking across the floor, even though he was the only one there. The worst thing, though, was the whispers. At first, Mark thought it was the wind, or maybe the house settling. But every night, right after he went to bed, he'd hear soft, muffled whispers coming from somewhere in the house. It wasn't a single voice. It sounded like multiple voices talking to each other, too quiet to understand, but too clear to ignore. They'd stop as soon as he turned on the light, but the second he turned it off again, they'd start up again. Mark decided to ignore it. He figured it was just his imagination. But then things escalated. One night as he lay in bed, he felt something cold touch his shoulder. He jerked awake, but there was nothing there, just the darkness. He checked his room, checked the windows, but everything was locked up tight. He laughed it off, thinking it was just a bad dream. The next night, he woke up to something worse. He opened his eyes, but he couldn't move. It was like his body was frozen in place. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. Panic set in as he realized he couldn't move a single part of his body. He tried to fight it, but he couldn't even blink. And then he felt it, a pressure on the bed beside him, like someone was sitting next to him. The whispering came again, but this time, it was different. The voices weren't soft. They were louder, clearer, and they were speaking directly to him. "Don't fight it," one voice said. "We've been waiting for you." Another voice joined in. "You shouldn't have come here." Mark wanted to scream, to run, but he was still frozen. He could feel the weight on the bed like someone was pressing down on him. The whispers filled his ears and he was sure he was going to lose his mind. Finally, after what felt like hours, the pressure on the bed lifted. Mark could move again. He jumped out of bed and turned on all the lights, his heart racing. But the whispers stopped. There was nothing in the room but the silence and the pounding of his own heart. The next day, Mark went straight to the landlord and asked if anyone had ever died in the house. The landlord hesitated before saying, "Yeah, actually. A family lived there before you. They moved out because they said the house was haunted, but we've never had any complaints after that. You're the first person to ask." Mark didn't know what to think, but the idea of leaving the house was hard. The rent was cheap, and it wasn't like he had a ton of options. He decided to stay, but that decision came with a price. Over the next few days, things got worse. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. He could hear it in every room, even when he wasn't at home. The voices were always there, always watching him. And then came the dreams. Mark started having vivid dreams of the house. In his dreams, he would walk through the rooms, but everything was wrong. The walls would move, the windows would shift, and there were always people in the shadows, faces he didn't recognize. In one dream, he was locked in the basement. He could hear the whispering voices again, but they were no longer friendly. They were angry, like they were coming for him. And then one night, after another sleepless evening, Mark decided he'd had enough. He couldn't take it anymore. He packed his things, prepared to leave the house for good. He even called a moving company to help him get out. But when he went to grab his keys, he noticed something strange. On the wall next to the front door, written in what looked like dust, were the words, "You can't leave." Mark froze. He had no idea how it got there. He hadn't seen anything when he moved in. He turned to leave the house, but when he reached for the door handle, it wouldn't open. It felt like the house itself was fighting to keep him there. The temperature dropped, and he could hear the whispers again. This time, they were right behind him, in his ear. "Stay with us." The voice whispered. He ran. He didn't look back. He didn't even bother to pack the rest of his things. He left everything behind, even his keys, as he bolted out of the door and into the night. Mark never went back to that house. The landlord called him multiple times, asking him to return the keys, but Mark never answered. He moved to another part of town and hasn't told anyone much about what happened since. But every now and then, Mark still hears the whispers. He still feels that cold pressure on his shoulder, that feeling like someone is sitting next to him in the dark. He says it's like the house followed him. Maybe it did. Maybe it always does. Some places, some houses, are never meant to be lived in. This is the story of something real. Something that still sends chills down my spine whenever I think about it. I'm going to tell you about the night that changed the way I see the world. It's not about ghosts, not exactly. It's worse, because this happened to someone I know. So listen carefully. It was early winter when my cousin Neil decided to take a solo road trip across the northern part of the country. He had just gone through a bad breakup, and the idea of long drives and lonely nights under the stars seemed to help him clear his head. He packed his camera, a sleeping bag, and some basic supplies in his car. No fixed plans. He just wanted to drive. On the fourth night of his trip, around 9 p.m., He was on a quiet stretch of road near a small village that barely showed up on the map. Trees lined both sides of the road, not many streetlights. His phone had one bar of signal, but Neil didn't care. He said the silence helped him breathe better. Then his car started acting weird. The headlights flickered once. Then the engine made a soft, sputtering sound, and the car just died. No warning, no lights, no sound. He got out to check under the hood, thinking maybe it was the battery or a loose wire. But he wasn't a car expert, so after a few minutes of pretending to know what he was doing, he gave up and decided to wait for a passing car. He leaned on the side of the car, pulled his hoodie tight, and just stared at the dark trees. That's when he noticed something. Across the road, between the trees, someone was standing there, still, quiet, watching him. He thought maybe it was a local villager or a traveler like him. He raised his hand and called out, "Hey, you need help too?" No response. He stepped closer to the edge of the road. The person didn't move, just stared. That's when he realized something was wrong. It wasn't just how still the figure was, it was the way the body looked. Wrong. Thin, almost too thin, and tall, taller than any normal person. Its arms hung too low, its head tilted slightly to one side, like it didn't understand what it was looking at. Neil froze. His instincts screamed at him to get back in the car, even though it wouldn't start. He stepped back slowly. The figure took one step forward. Neil turned and ran to the car, jumped in, and locked all the doors. The figure stopped at the edge of the road, now standing directly under the pale moonlight. And Neil saw its face, or what was supposed to be a face. No eyes, no nose, just a wide, flat surface like skin stretched over a skull. But it had a mouth, and it was smiling. A wide, too wide smile. Neil says he blinked once, and in that moment, it was gone. He sat frozen in the car for maybe 10 minutes. Then, he dared to look out the window. Nothing. The road was empty again, but his phone suddenly buzzed. One new message, unknown number. The message read, "Nice car. Can I come in?" He didn't think. He just hit the gas one more time. And this time, by some miracle, the engine roared back to life. He drove like a madman, not even caring where he was going, just needing to get far away. He found a lodge an hour later in the next town, locked the door, pulled the curtains, slept with a knife next to his bed. Didn't tell anyone for days. But that wasn't the end. 3 nights later, back home, he woke up at exactly 2:03 a.m. His phone buzzed again. Another message. Same number. "It's cold outside. Let me in." No one was outside. He checked. But for 3 more nights, the messages kept coming. Different words, same tone. "You looked right at me. I can wait." We almost touched. Then, it stopped. A full week of silence. And just when he thought maybe it was over, he found something that made him nearly faint. His camera, remember, the one he kept in the car for his road trip, had a bunch of photos he didn't take, all at night, all in the woods, from deep inside the trees, taken from behind bushes, from behind rocks, and in every photo the same figure, watching the car, watching him. In one photo you could see him sleeping inside the car. No one knew how. The pictures got there. The lens cap was supposed to be on. He never took it off unless he was taking photos himself. And he never ever left his car unlocked. That's when Neil changed. He doesn't go out at night anymore, doesn't drive alone, doesn't use that phone anymore. Got a new number, threw the old one in the river, burned the SIM. Sometimes he talks in his sleep, says things like, "It's still out there," or "It watched me breathe." I've heard him once. I stayed at his place last month. At 2 a.m., he sat up in bed and whispered, "Don't open the door." The weirdest part? No one had knocked. But I swear to you, I heard footsteps just outside the window, and the next morning, there was a message on my phone. "Nice story. Tell it again." So now I'm telling you, and maybe, just maybe it's listening. This is the story of something that happened to a girl I used to know. I'm going to tell you because I think you should hear it. It's not one of those made-up ghost stories. It happened. And once you hear it, you won't forget it. Her name was Emily, a quiet, smart girl, kept to herself mostly. She wasn't the type to make drama or try to scare people. That's why what happened to her stuck with me so much, because she never lied. She had just moved into a new apartment after getting her first job. It was a small place, just outside the city. Nothing fancy, just one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a window that looked out onto an alley. But it was hers, and she was excited. The building was old, though, the kind that creaked at night. The hallways smelled like damp wood and old carpet. Her apartment was on the second floor, number 2B. She moved in on a Sunday, and by Monday night, something already felt off. It started small. That night, while she was brushing her teeth, she heard a soft knock on the bathroom door. But she lived alone. She froze. The knock came again, slow, deliberate, like someone was playing with her. She opened the door fast, expecting maybe the sound came from the front door or a pipe shifting. But the hallway was empty. She laughed at herself and shook it off. Maybe she was just tired. The next night, she was in bed reading, and again, there was a knock, this time on her bedroom wall. Not loud, just gentle, from the other side. That wall connected to the apartment next to hers, 2A. But the landlord had told her that place was still vacant. She remembered that clearly. No furniture, no tenant, just an empty space. Still, she knocked back. Just one knock. Nothing happened. Silence. Until around 3 a.m. That's when she woke up suddenly, no idea why, and looked toward the wall. There was a knock 3 times, knock, knock, knock. This time she didn't move, just stared at the wall, heart racing. And then, her phone lit up, a message. "Do you like playing?" No number, just unknown. She didn't reply. She deleted it and tried to go back to sleep, but she didn't sleep well after that. The next day, she went to the landlord, asked if anyone had moved into 2A. "No," he said, "still empty." Emily told him about the knocking. He gave her this tired smile and said, "These old buildings make noise. You'll get used to it." That night she locked every door, shut all the windows and kept the light on. Around 2:45 a.m. she heard footsteps above her. Heavy ones. Slow, but she was on the top floor. There was no one above her. She grabbed her phone and called her friend Mark, even though it was nearly 3 in the morning. he answered groggy. Em? What's wrong? There's someone in the building, she whispered. In the empty apartment. I swear. He told her to stay on the phone, grab something to defend herself, and call the cops if she heard anything else. While they were talking, she heard it again, the knock. Only this time it wasn't on the wall. It was on her closet door. She turned and stared at it. Her heart was beating so loud she couldn't hear herself think. She whispered, Mark, it's in the closet. Silence on the other end. Then, very quietly, Mark said, Emily, get out of the apartment. She moved toward the door, still holding the phone. The closet door handle rattled behind her. She ran, didn't stop, didn't look back. She slept at Mark's that night. The next morning she went back with him to check her apartment. Nothing was broken. Nothing was moved. But something was definitely wrong. The closet. Inside, scratched into the wood of the back panel, were 5 words. Thanks for letting me in. She moved out that same day. Broke the lease, paid the fee, didn't care. The landlord didn't argue, just nodded slowly when she told him what she found. But it wasn't over. 2 weeks later, Mark got a message. Unknown number. Is Emily home? He blocked it. Then Emily's mom got one too. She's hiding. That's not fair. That's when Emily went to the police, showed them everything, the texts, the scratches, her phone records. But there was no proof, no suspect, no fingerprints. They filed a report. That's all they could do. But there's something else. A few months later, a new tenant moved into apartment 2A. He lasted 3 nights. The landlord told Emily he left in the middle of the night, no explanation, just tossed the keys on the floor and drove off. The apartment has been empty ever since. Sometimes, late at night, Emily still gets messages. She showed me one once. It said, "You knocked first." And when she blocked that number, another one messaged, "You can't shut the door if I'm already inside." That's when she stopped using her phone, got a landline instead, moved to a new city, new job, new name, trying to disappear. But you know what's weird? I visited her new place once, just last month. She was smiling, acting like things were finally okay. But then, as we were talking, I heard it, soft, gentle, almost like a game. Knock, knock, knock from the closet behind her. She didn't flinch. She just stared at me and said, "Don't open it." So now I'm telling you, and maybe it's just a story, or maybe it's already listening again. But tonight, if you hear 3 knocks, don't answer. This is the story of something that happened to my cousin Daniel. I'm going to tell you because it still gives me chills every time I think about it. This isn't one of those stories with shadows or monsters. It's worse. Because it involves real people. Daniel had just turned 21 when this happened. He lived alone in a small town in Oregon. He liked quiet things, reading, working on his car, long walks at night. Nothing wild or strange about him. One night, around midnight, he decided to take a walk through the woods behind his neighborhood. He used to go there all the time. There were trails, birds, and this one huge oak tree that he called the grandfather. He'd sit under it and just think. It was peaceful. But that night, something was different. He told me it started the moment he stepped onto the trail. Everything felt still, too still, like the woods were holding their breath. No wind, no sounds, just silence. He tried to shake it off, thinking maybe it was just a weird night. He walked deeper in, following the trail until he reached the grandfather. But before he could sit down, he saw something strange. There was a woman standing behind the tree. She was facing away from him, dressed in an old white dress that looked dirty, like it had been dragged through the woods. Her hair was long and dark, tangled, almost covering her back completely. He stopped, not sure what to do. At first he thought maybe she was just another late-night walker. But then he noticed she wasn't moving, not even breathing. He called out, "Hey, are you okay?" She didn't turn around. He stepped closer, a little nervous now. "Do you need help?" Still nothing. Then, without moving her body, he said her head twisted slightly, just enough for him to see one eye looking at him from the side of her face. That was enough. He turned and walked quickly back to the trail. But here's the thing, as he walked, he didn't hear footsteps behind him. He heard footsteps in front of him, like someone was on the trail just around the next bend, walking toward him. He stopped, waited, tried to listen. But the steps stopped too. He turned around. The woman was gone. He thought maybe he imagined it. Maybe he was just tired. So he picked up his pace, trying to get home fast. That's when he noticed the trail signs had changed. He remembered clearly. There were 3 turns on the way to the big oak. 2 lefts and a right. But now, there were 4, and none of them felt familiar. He started to panic. The trees looked the same, but nothing felt right. It was like the forest had shifted. He pulled out his phone. No signal. Of course. He picked a direction and just ran. After maybe 10 minutes, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The same big oak. The grandfather. He had somehow run in a full circle, and under the tree the woman was now facing him. Her mouth was slightly open, like she was about to speak, but she didn't. She just stood there. Then she took 1 step forward. Daniel didn't wait. He ran. Branches scratched his face. Thorns ripped his shirt. He didn't care. He didn't stop after what felt like forever. He burst out of the woods, fell onto someone's front lawn, and lay there shaking. It was a house he'd never seen before. An old man came out with a flashlight, helped him up, asked if he was okay. Daniel told him everything. The man didn't look surprised. He just said, "You saw her." Daniel said, "Who? Who is she?" The man shook his head. "She's been there for years. My brother saw her when he was young, never walked again after that." Daniel asked if anyone had ever talked to her. The man just said, "You don't want her to talk to you." He gave Daniel a ride home. Daniel didn't sleep that night, or the next one. He told me all of this when I visited him a week later. He looked tired, pale, like he hadn't been eating. He showed me the scratches on his arms. And then he said something that chilled me. "I don't think I left the woods." I asked him what he meant. He said, "Things have been wrong since that night. I hear knocks on my window, but I live on the 2nd floor. I see her in reflections sometimes, standing behind me." I didn't believe him at first. Thought maybe he was just scared. But then I spent the night at his place. At around 2:47 a.m., I woke up suddenly. There was a knock at the window. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. Daniel was already sitting up, wide awake. He didn't look at me. He just whispered, "Don't move. She checks." I asked, "Checks what?" he said. "To see if you remember." We didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I asked him to come stay with me for a while, get away from the town, from the woods. But he said, "It won't help. She knows where I am." I left that day, worried sick. 2 weeks later, Daniel disappeared. His phone was found in his apartment. His wallet was still on the table. Nothing was broken. No signs of struggle. But on his bedroom mirror, written in something dark, were the words, "Found you." Police searched for weeks. No leads, no clues. I still visit his mom sometimes. We don't talk about it. There's nothing to say, but a month ago I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It said, "Don't walk the woods. She remembers faces." And taped to the bottom was a photo. It was Daniel, standing next to the big oak, and behind him, that same woman. Only this time she was smiling. Now I don't walk at night. I don't go into the woods. And if I hear a knock on my window after dark, I don't look. Because I think she remembers me too. And maybe one day she'll come check, just like she did for Daniel. This is the story of a man named Simon. I'm gonna tell you because you might think it's just another ghost story, but believe me, this one's different. It's not about things that go bump in the night. It's not about spirits or demons, or things you see in the shadows. It's about something far more terrifying, something you can't escape no matter how hard you try. Simon was an ordinary guy. He worked in a small bookshop in the city. His life was simple. He lived in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building. Nothing fancy, nothing remarkable. His days were quiet. He'd wake up, make himself coffee, work, then come home and read books. Sometimes he'd take walks around the city. One evening, Simon was heading home from work when something caught his eye. It was a small antique shop that he'd never seen before. He didn't even know it was there. The shop had an old sign with the words, "Curiosities and Oddities" written in faded gold letters. The windows were dusty, and the lights inside flickered as if the shop hadn't been visited in years. Something about it intrigued him, so he decided to go in. The moment he stepped inside, he felt it. The air was thick, like something was pressing down on him. It wasn't a bad feeling, but it wasn't good either. He looked around the shop. There were shelves upon shelves of strange things, old paintings, worn books, antique clocks, and objects he couldn't even identify. The room smelled of must and old wood. Behind the counter stood a thin, elderly man with a pale face and dark eyes. His clothes were old-fashioned, almost too formal for today. The man smiled when he saw Simon, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was almost as if the man was waiting for Simon to ask him about something. Simon walked through the aisles, browsing the items. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just exploring. And then he found it. A small, ornate box tucked away on the top shelf. It was made of dark wood, polished smooth, with intricate carvings on every side. There was something about it that felt wrong. It looked out of place among the other items in the shop. But Simon couldn't help himself. He reached up and took the box in his hands. As soon as his fingers touched the box, he felt a chill run down his spine. He quickly set it back down, thinking he had just imagined the sensation, but the shopkeeper had been watching him closely. "You found something interesting," the old man said, his voice low and raspy. Simon nodded. "Yeah, it's strange." "What is it?" The old man's smile widened. "Ah, it's an old family heirloom. It has a history. Some say it's cursed, others say it brings good fortune. But it's not for everyone. Only the ones who truly need it should take it." Simon was curious now. "Why?" The old man's eyes darkened and he leaned forward. "Because once it's in your possession, you cannot escape it." Simon frowned. "Escape it?" The old man didn't answer. He simply turned and went back to polishing a brass candle holder on the counter. Simon, a little unsettled, left the shop quickly, but he couldn't stop thinking about the box. Something about it tugged at him, even though he couldn't explain why. Over the next few days, Simon's life started to shift. It wasn't anything big, just small, unsettling things. He began having vivid dreams about the box, seeing it in his hands, hearing strange whispers as if something was calling to him. Every time he closed his eyes, the box would appear in his mind. It wasn't long before he couldn't shake the feeling that the box was following him. The whispers grew louder. He started seeing things out of the corner of his eyes, shadows, faces, and when he looked directly at them, they were gone. One night, Simon couldn't take it any longer. He went back to the shop. When he stepped inside, the shopkeeper wasn't there. Instead, the shelves were empty, the lights flickering more than before. It felt colder than it had the last time he visited. Simon walked to the back of the shop and found the box exactly where he had left it. Without thinking, he picked it up. He felt the chill again, but this time it didn't bother him. In fact, it felt comforting. He knew what he had to do. The old man appeared suddenly, standing in front of Simon with his arms crossed. "You shouldn't have taken it," the man said softly. "I need it," Simon replied, his voice trembling slightly. He didn't understand why, but he knew it was true. He needed it. The shopkeeper's face twisted into a grimace. "Once it's in your hands, you can never put it down. It will follow you until you can't breathe anymore. It will never leave." Simon didn't care. He was beyond reasoning now. He turned and left the shop, the box in his hands. That night, things got worse. It wasn't just the whispers anymore. He heard voices, loud, angry voices, all coming from the box. They were shouting at him, screaming his name, telling him to open it. But Simon refused. He knew better than to open it. He could feel the pressure building in his chest. It was like the box was trying to get out, trying to break free. The sounds grew louder, more frantic. He couldn't think. He couldn't breathe. And then he felt a hand on his shoulder. Simon froze. When he turned around, there was no one there. But when he looked down, the box was wide open. Inside, there was nothing. No object, no item, just an empty space. But that wasn't the worst part. From inside the box, a figure began to emerge. Slowly at first, like it was stretching its limbs. After being cramped for too long, The figure was tall, thin, and covered in shadows. It didn't have a face, only a dark void where its head should have been. Simon tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure moved toward him, its dark, hands reaching for him. Simon stepped back, but there was nowhere to go. The walls of his apartment seemed to close in around him. The figure grabbed his arm, and then everything went black. When Simon woke up, he was lying in his bed, the box at his side. It was closed again. The room was quiet, just like before. But the whispers never stopped. He knew now that the box had found him. He couldn't escape it. No matter how far he ran, no matter where he went, it was a part of him he could never get rid of. And I think if you ever find yourself walking down a quiet street with a shop you've never noticed before, you might just see that same shop with the same old sign, and you might find yourself drawn to it. And if you do, and if you pick up the box, just know this: you won't be able to put it down. And when it comes for you, there will be no escape. This is the story of my friend Matt. It's the kind of story you hear and think, no way, that's just a creepy tale someone made up. But it's not. I know because Matt swore every word of it was true. And he isn't the type of guy to exaggerate. Matt had always been an adventurous person. He loved hiking, camping, and anything that kept him out in nature. He was always looking for new places to explore, new trails to hike. One summer, he found out about an old abandoned cabin deep in the woods outside a small town in the middle of nowhere. It had been there for decades, and no one really knew much about it, except that it was supposedly haunted. Now, Matt wasn't someone who got scared easily. He scoffed at the idea of ghosts and things that go bump in the night. He figured it was just an old story that people told to keep kids away. So when he heard about this cabin, he decided to check it out. He packed his backpack with the usual hiking gear, water, snacks, his camera, and set off for what he expected to be a quiet, uneventful trip. He drove out to the town, parked his car near the edge of the woods, and started hiking. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft oranges and pinks. The trail was narrow, the trees thick with leaves, and the air had that earthy scent that you only find in deep forests. After about an hour of walking, Matt came across the cabin. It was exactly as he had imagined it. Old weathered wood, a roof that looked like it might cave in any minute, and broken windows. It was isolated. No other houses or signs of life for miles around. Matt took a few pictures of the cabin from different angles, admiring the eerie beauty of it. He could already hear the whispers of the legend in his mind, the ghost stories people in the town had passed down for generations. But Matt wasn't interested in the stories. He was interested in the adventure. As the light started to fade, he decided it was time to head back. But as he turned to leave, something caught his eye. It was a faint glow coming from one of the broken windows of the cabin. It wasn't bright, but it was enough to make him pause. For a moment, he thought it was just the fading light playing tricks on him, but then he heard it. A faint sound, a soft whisper. It wasn't coming from the wind, and it wasn't the usual rustling of leaves. It was more like a voice, but it was so quiet, so faint, that Matt wasn't sure if he had actually heard it at all. He stood still for a moment, straining to listen, but the voice stopped. Curiosity got the better of him. He walked closer to the cabin, stepping lightly over the broken wood and overgrown vines. As he got nearer, the voice came again, clearer this time. "Help me." Matt froze. The voice sounded like a woman's. It was soft and pleading, barely above a whisper. But it was real. He wasn't imagining it. His heart started to race, but the rational part of his mind pushed the fear aside. It was just a trick. Someone else out here in the woods, maybe. He took another step forward, closer to the window. That's when he saw her. A woman standing in the corner of the cabin. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, staring directly at him. But there was something wrong about her. She wasn't moving. She was frozen. Her hands were pressed against the glass, and her mouth was open as if she was trying to scream, but no sound came out. Matt felt a chill run through him. His stomach turned. He wasn't sure if it was fear or something else entirely. He backed up slowly, but as he turned to leave, the woman's eyes followed him. They seemed to follow him with a strange, unnatural intensity, and that's when he heard the voice again. "Please, don't leave me." It wasn't just a whisper this time. It was louder, almost like a command. Matt couldn't move. He was frozen, staring at the cabin, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. But it didn't make sense. He should have turned and run. He should have ignored it. But instead, he took a step forward, closer to the window, closer to the woman. As he approached, something strange happened. The air around him grew cold. The wind picked up, swirling through the trees, carrying with it an unsettling howl. He could hear something moving inside the cabin, like something scraping along the floor. The woman's face started to change, her features twisting and distorting, her eyes now black as coal, her mouth stretching into a grotesque grin. "Leave me alone," Matt shouted, stepping back in panic. But it was too late. The woman's hand slammed against the window, sending a loud crack through the silence. The glass shattered, and Matt stumbled backward, falling to the ground. He scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest, and turned to run. But something caught his foot. He looked down and saw a black, rotting hand wrapping around his ankle. The fingers were long, skeletal, covered in a layer of decaying flesh. He screamed, kicking at it, trying to break free. But the hand tightened, pulling him back toward the cabin. That's when he saw it. A figure emerging from the darkness. It was tall, impossibly tall, and it moved with a fluid, unnatural grace. It had no face, no features, just a dark, swirling mass of shadows. The air grew thick, heavy with a sense of dread. Matt couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. The figure reached out with long, thin arms, grabbing hold of him, and then everything went black. When Matt woke up, he was lying outside the cabin, his clothes soaked in sweat. The sun had risen, and the woods were silent. His body ached, and his head felt foggy, like he had been drugged. But when he looked up, the cabin was gone. The entire place had vanished, as if it had never been there at all. He tried to stand, but his legs gave way and he collapsed onto the ground. His heart was still pounding in his chest, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was following him. He looked around, but there was nothing. No cabin, no figure, nothing. For days after, Matt couldn't shake the feeling that the woman in the cabin was still watching him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. Every time he looked over his shoulder, he felt the presence of something dark following him. But he never told anyone, not his family, not his friends. He couldn't, because he knew the truth. It wasn't just a ghost, it was something worse. Something that followed him back. And no matter how far he ran, no matter how hard he tried to escape, it would always be there. Always watching, waiting. And Matt knew one thing for certain. The woman in the cabin never left. This is the story of a man named James. He was a quiet, solitary person, the type who preferred to stay to himself rather than spend time socializing. His life was simple, working in a small office downtown, spending weekends watching old movies, and reading books in his cozy apartment. But that all changed one weekend in the fall, when he decided to visit a small town in the countryside. James had heard stories about this place, a town named Ashford, but he never paid much attention to them. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and the locals liked to tell strange tales about their ancestors. Some even claimed that the town was cursed, but James didn't believe in curses. He thought they were just stories made up by people who had nothing better to do. One Friday, after a particularly long week at work, he decided to take a drive out of the city and explore the countryside. He packed a small bag with a few essentials, grabbed his camera to take some pictures of the beautiful fall scenery, and headed toward Ashford. The drive was peaceful, with golden and amber leaves falling from the trees, a light mist in the air. As he got closer to the town, however, something felt off. There was an odd quietness in the air, like the place was holding its breath. He brushed it off as just the calm of a small town, where nothing much ever happened. James arrived in Ashford in the late afternoon. The town was small, as he expected, with a few houses scattered along the main road and a couple of small shops near the center. But there was something strange about the place. The streets were eerily empty, and even though the sun was still shining, the town seemed to have a shadow hanging over it. It was like the kind of place you'd expect to see in a horror movie, where everything looks normal at first, but something isn't quite right. He checked into a small inn at the edge of town, run by a quiet older woman named Mrs. Sutherland. She didn't say much during the check-in, but there was something in her eyes that made James feel uneasy. She handed him the key to his room, gave a curt nod, and wished him a quiet night. James decided to take a walk around the town, hoping to clear his head. As he strolled through the empty streets, he passed an old church on the outskirts of Ashford. The building looked ancient, its stone walls worn down by centuries of weather. The steeple reached toward the sky, and the windows were stained with dark, murky colors. A sense of foreboding washed over him, but he continued walking, hoping to shake the strange feeling. Later that evening, after a quiet dinner at a small restaurant, James returned to the inn. The night was falling quickly, and the town felt even more deserted than before. He passed a few houses on his way back to his room, but no one was out. No lights were on in the windows. It felt like everyone had simply disappeared. He reached his room, locked the door behind him, and sat on the bed staring out the window. The silence outside was suffocating. He pulled the curtain shut and turned on the TV, hoping to distract himself from the unsettling feeling that had settled over him. As he watched the screen, something caught his eye through the window. He quickly turned his gaze back to the street. It was a figure, a person, standing in the middle of the road. James squinted, trying to make out the details of the figure. It was too far to see clearly, but he could tell it was tall with a strange, hunched posture. It didn't move, just stood there, staring at the inn. He tried to dismiss it as a trick of the light, maybe someone walking by, but the figure didn't move. It was as if it was waiting for something. The longer James watched, the more it unnerved him. He turned away from the window and decided to go to bed, hoping the strange feeling would pass by morning. But when he woke up the next morning, things had gotten worse. The town was still empty, but now it felt more oppressive. James could feel eyes on him, though no one was around. He quickly grabbed his camera and decided to take some pictures of the town before he left. As he walked down the main street, he noticed something strange. Every single house, every single building, had an old, weathered door that seemed out of place, like they hadn't been touched in years. There was no sign of life anywhere. Not a single person walking the streets. As he took a photo of a house near the edge of town, he heard a faint sound, like a whisper. It was so quiet, he almost didn't catch it at first. He turned around, but there was no one there. He shrugged it off as just the wind, but the unease was growing. Suddenly, he heard the whisper again, only this time it was louder, clearer. "Help me." James froze, his heart racing. He turned looking for the source of the voice, but there was no one in sight. It was like the voice had come from nowhere, or maybe it was from inside his own head. He shook it off, trying to convince himself it was just his mind playing tricks on him. But as he walked back toward the inn, he heard it again. "Help me!" This time it sounded closer, almost as if it was right behind him. James spun around, but again, no one was there. Panic started to rise in his chest. He turned and ran back to the inn, locking himself in his room. He stood there for a few moments, breathing heavily, trying to calm himself down. The whispers seemed to follow him, echoing in his mind, but there was nothing he could do. He had to get out of Ashford. He packed his things, grabbed his camera, and rushed to the front desk to check out. Mrs. Sutherland was there, as quiet as ever. She didn't seem surprised to see him in such a hurry. "Leaving so soon?" she asked in a calm, almost monotone voice. "Yeah, I don't feel well. I think I'll head back home," James replied, his voice shaky. Mrs. Sutherland just nodded and handed him the bill. He paid quickly and turned to leave, but as he opened the door, something stopped him. A cold breeze swept through the room, and he heard it, the whisper, so loud now, right behind him. "Help me." He turned to see a figure standing in the doorway. It was Mrs. Sutherland, but she wasn't quite the same. Her face was pale, her eyes empty, and her mouth stretched into a twisted smile. "You should have left sooner," she whispered. James stumbled backward, his heart pounding. The room seemed to spin around him. He turned and ran out of the inn, not looking back. He didn't stop until he was back in his car, speeding down the road away from Ashford. But even as he drove, he could still hear the whisper in his mind. It was as if it was following him even now. And to this day, James can't escape the feeling that Ashford is still there, just waiting, with its empty streets and its whispers always calling to him. This is the story of a woman named Emily. She had always been a curious person, someone who liked to explore the unknown and test the boundaries of what she thought was real. Her friends often called her reckless, but Emily didn't mind. To her, life was about adventure and she didn't want to let any opportunity slip by. So, when she heard about the abandoned house on the edge of town, a house that had been empty for decades, her curiosity got the better of her. The house was located on the outskirts of Maplewood, a small town just a few hours from her city apartment. Emily had passed by the house many times during her weekend drives, but had never thought much about it. It was a large, dark Victorian mansion that looked more like a haunted house from the movies than something real. The windows were boarded up, the yard overgrown with weeds, and the gate was rusted and falling apart. The locals whispered about it, but no one ever seemed brave enough to go near it. There were rumors that the house had a dark history, that strange things happened there, but Emily never believed in ghost stories. She figured it was just a house that had been abandoned over the years, and she was determined to prove that there was nothing to be afraid of. One Friday evening, Emily made the decision. She packed a small bag, grabbed her flashlight, and drove to Maplewood. The sun had already set by the time she arrived, and the house stood silhouetted against the fading light, its tall spires reaching into the sky. The air was cool and crisp, and an unsettling silence seemed to hang over the property. Emily stepped out of her car, heart pounding with excitement. She was about to step into the unknown, and the thrill of it all made her feel alive. She walked up to the rusted gate and pushed it open with a creak. The yard was overgrown with weeds, and the steps leading up to the front porch were cracked and worn. Emily paused for a moment, looking up at the house. There was something about it that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The windows, though covered with boards, seemed to watch her, as if the house itself was aware of her presence. But Emily shook off the feeling. She was here to explore, not to be scared by old stories. With a deep breath, she stepped onto the porch and tried the front door. To her surprise, it opened with ease, the old wood groaning as she pushed it open. The air inside was thick with dust, and the smell of decay hung in the air. Emily switched on her flashlight and stepped inside, the beam of light cutting through the darkness. She felt a shiver run down her spine, but she pressed forward, her sense of adventure pushing her onward. The inside of the house was just as eerie as the outside. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, and the floorboards creaked under her weight. There was an old staircase in the center of the room, leading up to the second floor, and several doors leading off into different rooms. Emily took a few more steps, exploring the living room, which was filled with old, dusty furniture. She ran her fingers over the fabric of an old armchair, her flashlight illuminating the forgotten remnants of a time long past. As she moved deeper into the house, she began to feel like something wasn't right. The silence in the air was oppressive, and every creak of the house seemed amplified, as if the walls themselves were alive. Emily's flashlight flickered for a moment, and she stopped in her tracks, her heart racing. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that it was just an old house. But the feeling in the pit of her stomach told her otherwise. Something was watching her. She tried to shake off the unease and decided to explore the second floor. She made her way up the staircase, the steps groaning under her weight. At the top, she found a long hallway with several doors, each one slightly ajar. Emily chose the first door on the left, opening it slowly. Inside, the room was dimly lit by the faint glow of her flashlight. It looked like it had once been a bedroom, with a large four-poster bed and an old dresser against the wall. But what caught her eye was the painting on the wall. It was a portrait of a woman, dressed in old-fashioned clothes. Her eyes seemed to follow Emily as she moved around the room, and for a moment, Emily felt like the woman in the painting was staring directly at her. The air in the room grew colder, and Emily shivered. She quickly moved away from the painting and left the room, her pulse quickening. She tried to calm herself, telling herself that it was just an old painting, nothing more. But as she moved down the hall to the next room, she heard something. It was faint at first, but as she listened, it became clearer, a soft whispering, like someone was speaking in the room just beyond the door. Emily froze. She had heard of haunted houses before, but she had never believed in ghosts. Yet, standing there in the hallway, she couldn't deny the cold feeling that had taken over her. The whispering grew louder, more distinct. It was as if someone was calling her name. She turned the doorknob and slowly pushed the door open, the sound of the hinges echoing through the silence. Inside the room was a large mirror, framed in dark wood. The whispering was louder now, and Emily's breath caught in her throat. She walked toward the mirror, her flashlight flickering again. As she reached out to touch the glass, the whispering stopped, and for a brief moment, everything was silent. Emily stared into the mirror, trying to steady her nerves. But then she saw it. In the reflection, standing behind her, was a shadowy figure. It was tall, dressed in old clothes, and its face was obscured by darkness. Emily's heart skipped a beat, and she spun around, but the room was empty. There was no one there. She turned back to the mirror, and the figure was gone. She felt her chest tighten, and the room seemed to close in around her. Panic set in as she backed away from the mirror, but then she heard it again. The whispering. This time, it was clear, almost pleading. "Leave. Now." Emily's hands trembled as she turned and fled from the room, stumbling down the hallway toward the stairs. She could hear footsteps behind her, faint but growing louder with every passing second. Her heart raced as she reached the staircase and nearly tripped as she ran down it, desperate to escape. She burst out the front door, the cool night air hitting her face like a slap. She didn't stop to look back, didn't care to know what was chasing her. She ran all the way to her car, slamming the door behind her. It wasn't until she was driving away from the house that she felt a sense of relief, the weight lifting from her chest. As she looked back in the rearview mirror, she saw the silhouette of the house standing in the distance. The lights in the window seemed to flicker, as if someone or something was still watching her. And as she drove away, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she would never be able to escape the house. Not truly, because somehow it had already followed her. The whispering followed her too, echoing in her mind, a constant reminder that some places are better left unexplored. This is the story of one night I'll never forget. A real night. A true story. I'm going to tell you everything that happened, just as it did. No lies, no drama added, just the cold, creepy truth. So listen carefully, because once I start, you'll realize why I still can't sleep with the lights off. It all started when I was visiting my cousin Ryan, who lived in a small town surrounded by thick woods. You know the kind of place. No streetlights, barely any signal on your phone, and just too quiet after dark. I was staying there for a week during my college break. Ryan and I were close. We grew up together, and even though we were older now, nothing really changed when we hung out. Same jokes, same energy. That night, it was just the two of us at his place. His parents were out of town. We were sitting on the porch around 11 p.m. drinking soda and talking about random stuff. That's when he said something that shifted the mood completely. He pointed towards the woods behind the house and said, "You ever hear about the Hollow Man?" I laughed. "What is this? A campfire story?" But Ryan didn't laugh. He looked dead serious. "No, I'm serious. People around here believe in him. A thing, not a person. Tall, thin, walks weird, and makes no noise. They say it lives in the forest." I rolled my eyes. Sounds like Slender Man's poor cousin. But then he told me about a girl who went missing last summer. Her name was Lily, 17 years old. She was walking her dog near the woods in the evening. Her dog came back alone, covered in scratches. They never found her. Ryan said a few hunters around here reported seeing something tall, almost like a shadow, moving between the trees. "It's like your eyes don't want to look at it," one guy said in an interview that Ryan showed me on YouTube. I still thought it was a small town ghost story, but I admit, a chill went down my back. Maybe it was the night air, or the woods, or something else. Around midnight, Ryan dared me to go to the edge of the woods with him, just a walk, not too deep in. I agreed, mostly to prove him wrong. We grabbed 2 flashlights and walked behind the house. It got quiet real fast. No crickets, no wind, just silence. We followed a path through the grass for maybe 5 minutes. Our flashlights weren't that strong, so everything beyond 20 feet was just black. Then we heard it. A snapping sound, like a branch being stepped on. We stopped. I whispered, "Probably a deer." But the second sound wasn't a snap. It was like something brushing against a tree. Slow, soft, too soft. Then Ryan shined his flashlight to the left, and for a split second I saw something, not clearly, but tall, way taller than any human, and thin. The light barely touched it before it moved behind a tree. "Did you see that?" Ryan said, his voice shaking. I nodded, frozen. He whispered, "Run?" I didn't answer. I just turned and ran. We both did. Through the grass, not even caring where the path was. I almost tripped twice. We got back to the house, slammed the door, and locked it. Both of us were breathing like we'd run a mile. Ryan looked pale. I must have looked worse. We stayed in the living room, lights on, watching the woods through the window. For a while, nothing happened. We thought maybe we just saw a tree shadow or our minds played tricks. But then the motion sensor light on the backyard porch came on. We both looked. Nothing. No animal. No wind. But the light came on. Then we heard it. 3 knocks. Not at the front door, at the back one. Soft. Slow. Like someone was being polite. Ryan whispered, "No one knocks like that at midnight." I wanted to move, to grab something, to say something, but I couldn't. My body refused. Then we heard a voice, not loud, not angry, not even scary, just wrong. It said, "Let me in." My blood turned cold. The voice sounded off, like someone trying to sound human. It didn't have the right rhythm. The words were too even, too flat. Ryan shook his head, eyes wide. We backed away from the kitchen where the back door was, still staring at it. The knocking came again, but this time it was faster, still soft but more eager. We ran upstairs and locked ourselves in his room. We didn't sleep. We sat there back against the door with a baseball bat between us. Around 3 a.m., we finally looked out the window again. The backyard was dark. The light had gone off, but on the grass, right near the door, was something. I squinted. My heart jumped. Footprints. Long, thin, not shaped like human feet, more like claws. Like something walked up to the door barefoot, and not something from this world. The next morning we checked everything. No one around, no prank signs, just those prints. Ryan's dad came back that afternoon. We told him everything. He didn't laugh. He just said, "Never go into those woods again, not at night." He never explained. I left the next day, and I've never been back to that house since. But the thing is, sometimes I dream about that voice, the way it said those 3 words, "Let me in," and I wonder, what if we had? I know this was long, but I had to tell someone, because it was real. I felt it in my bones. And if you're ever walking near the woods and hear a soft knock, don't answer it. Don't go near it. Just turn around and run. This is the story of something that happened to my friend Megan. I'm going to tell you exactly how she told it to me, and trust me, it still gives me chills every time I think about it. It's one of those stories that doesn't just scare you, it stays with you, makes you double check your locks, makes you keep the lights on a little longer. So, listen closely, because this one is true and terrifying. Megan had just moved into a new apartment in the city. She was excited. It, was her first place on her own after college. The building was old but charming. Brick walls, creaky floors, and narrow hallways that smelled faintly like dust and something else. Maybe old wood or forgotten memories. Her unit was on the 3rd floor. Small, but perfect for her. A bedroom, a bathroom, a little kitchen, and a living room with one big window that looked out onto the street. Everything was fine for the first couple of weeks. She decorated it nicely. She felt independent, free. But then small things started to happen. Things she ignored at first. It began with noises. Megan would hear soft footsteps late at night, not from above or beside her, but from inside the apartment, like someone walking from her kitchen to her living room. Then silence. She would freeze in bed, holding her breath, and listen, but she never found anything. One night, she thought she saw someone standing near her window, just a shadowy shape, but when she turned the lights on, there was nothing there. She told herself it was just her imagination. Maybe the light from the street was playing tricks. Then came the knocking. It started at exactly 2:13 a.m. Just 3 slow knocks on her front door. Not loud, just steady. She sat up in bed, heart racing. Who knocks at that time of night? She waited, held her breath. Another 3 knocks. She got out of bed, grabbed her phone, and walked carefully to the door. She looked through the peephole. No one was there. Just the empty hallway. She didn't open it. The next morning she asked her neighbor across the hall, an older woman named Mrs. Cartwright, if she'd heard anything. The woman looked at her with a pale face and said, "Don't open your door after midnight in this building, ever." Megan laughed awkwardly, thinking it was just some old lady's superstition. But Mrs. Cartwright didn't laugh. That night, it happened again. 3 knocks, 2:13 a.m. She looked through the peephole again. Nothing. This time she felt brave. She opened the door. The hallway was empty. Cold. But on the floor just outside the door was something that hadn't been there before. A small broken doll, old, dirty, and missing one eye. Megan picked it up slowly, confused, and a little creeped out. She set it on her kitchen counter and went back to bed, though she barely slept. The next day, she asked the building manager, a man named Dale, if the place had a history. Dale just shrugged. "Old buildings make weird noises," he said. "Don't let your mind play tricks." But Megan knew it wasn't just noises. That doll hadn't appeared by itself. The knocking continued. Every night. Same time. Same pattern. Sometimes she'd find something left outside. A feather, a piece of string, a tiny rusted spoon. Like someone, or something, was trying to leave her gifts. One night she set up her phone camera facing the door. She turned it on, left the hallway light on, and went to bed. The next morning she checked the recording. At 2:13 the knocking started. Then something moved in front of the camera. She paused the video, her heart nearly stopping. It was blurry, but she could make out the shape. A figure. Tall. Thin. Pale face. Black eyes. And it just stood there, facing the door. Not moving. Not speaking. Just standing there, like it was waiting. Then, slowly, it raised a hand and knocked. 3 times. Then, it turned and walked away, but not down the hall. It walked out of frame and then the screen went black. She hadn't touched the phone. It should have kept recording, but the video ended right there. Megan wanted to leave, pack everything and go. But it wasn't that simple. She didn't have family nearby, and breaking her lease would cost too much. So she stayed. But she never felt alone in that apartment again. One night, everything changed. She woke up around 2 a.m. to a strange sound. Not knocking, not footsteps. Breathing, right next to her bed. She didn't dare open her eyes. She lay still, barely breathing herself, trying to tell herself it was a dream, that she was imagining it. But the breathing continued, slow, heavy. And then she felt it. Something brushing against her arm. She screamed and shot out of bed, flipping the light on. No one there. But on the bed, right where she had been lying, was the doll again. This time with both eyes missing. She ran to the door, ready to leave, but it wouldn't open. The lock was jammed. She grabbed her phone to call for help, but the screen was black. Dead. Even though she had charged it before bed. And then the knocking started again. But not from the front door. From the inside of the closet. 3 knocks. Slow. She backed away, hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. The closet door creaked open by itself, just an inch. Enough for her to see darkness inside. And then something whispered her name. Megan. That broke her. She ran to the window and screamed for help, banged on the glass. The lights in the building across the street turned on. Someone must have seen her. The door finally opened, just like that, as if whatever was inside had let her go. She ran out of the building in her pajamas, barefoot, holding nothing. She never went back. Dale tried to contact her, left voicemails, said her stuff was still there, but Megan never answered. She stayed with a friend for weeks, got a new apartment on the other side of town. Different area, different people, no creepy history. But she still dreams about that closet, still hears those knocks in her sleep. 3 slow knocks. And every now and then, she wakes up and finds a small object beside her bed. A feather, a piece of string, a spoon, as if it followed her and still wants in. This is the story of something that happened to my friend Jake. Now, I know you've heard people talk about creepy stories before, but trust me, you won't hear anything like this. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder if some things are better left unknown. This is Jake's story, and it still gives me the chills whenever I think about it. Jake had just gotten a new job at a small, quiet bookstore in the heart of the city. The shop was old, tucked away between two modern buildings. From the outside, it looked like one of those places you'd pass by without even noticing. But when you walked inside, it was a different world. The shelves were packed with books, stacked high, most of them ancient, with pages that smelled of dust and age. The owner, a man named Mr. Alden, was a peculiar person, short, wiry, and always wearing glasses that seemed a little too big for his face. He'd been running the store for decades and had a reputation for being a bit strange. But Jake didn't mind. He liked the quiet, the solitude, and most of all, the books. One evening, after closing time, Jake was finishing up some of his work. The place had been eerily quiet that day. No customers had come in for hours. As the clock struck midnight, Jake was just about to leave when he noticed something odd. A door at the far back of the store, one he hadn't paid attention to before, was slightly ajar. He hadn't realized there was a door there at all. He figured it must lead to some kind of storage room or maybe even the basement. Curiosity got the better of him, so he walked over and pushed the door open. To his surprise, there was no dusty storage room. Instead, it led to a narrow staircase that descended deep into the earth. The air was cold, and there was a faint smell of mold. He hesitated for a moment, but then his curiosity pushed him forward. Jake wasn't the type to scare easily, and something about that staircase pulled him in. As he descended, he noticed that the walls were lined with old bookshelves. But these weren't normal books. The books on these shelves were different. Strange, ancient-looking tomes bound in leather, some with symbols on the covers that Jake didn't recognize. He ran his fingers over one of them, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The room was silent, except for the faint sound of his own breath. The further he went down, the colder it got, and the air seemed to thicken. At the bottom of the stairs was a small, dimly lit room. The walls were covered in even more strange books, but in the center of the room was something else. A large wooden desk, old and worn, with a chair facing it. On the desk was a book. But this wasn't like the others. The book seemed alive. It was open, pages flipping on their own, as though the book was breathing. The air around it seemed to shimmer with some strange energy, and Jake could feel it in his bones. He felt drawn to it, but at the same time, something inside him told him to leave. But Jake didn't leave. He walked forward, his feet moving on their own, until he was standing right next to the desk. He stared at the book, unable to look away. The pages continued to turn by themselves, the words on them written in a language he couldn't understand. Then the pages stopped turning. The book fell open to one page, and in that moment Jake felt a cold breath on his neck. He spun around, but there was nothing there. Suddenly, he heard a whisper. At first it was faint, just a sound in the air. Then it grew louder and Jake could hear words, soft, urgent words, coming from the book. The voice was low, almost like it was coming from the depths of the earth itself. "Help me. Help me. Let me out." Jake froze. His heart pounded in his chest as the whispering continued. He couldn't make sense of the words at first, but then they became clearer. "Let me out. Let me out of the book." Jake felt his stomach drop. He reached out, his fingers trembling, and touched the page of the book. The moment he did, the room seemed to shift. The air grew thicker, and the walls around him started to warp. The shadows in the corners of the room stretched and twisted, as if something was trying to break through. He pulled his hand back quickly, but it was too late. The room had changed. The walls seemed to close in on him. He could feel the weight of something heavy pressing on his chest, and the air became thick, suffocating. The book on the desk began to shake, its pages flipping wildly, as though something was trying to escape. Then, the whispers grew louder, more frantic. "Please, let me out!" Jake took a step back, his heart racing. He turned to run, but as he did, the door to the stairs slammed shut. He was trapped. The room seemed to be closing in on him, the shadows swirling around like they had a life of their own. He tried to pull at the door, but it wouldn't budge. His mind raced. What was happening? What was this place? And then, a figure appeared in front of him. It was tall, thin, and covered in a cloak of darkness. The figure had no face, just a void where its eyes should have been. It reached out a hand, and in a voice that was both everywhere and nowhere, it spoke. "You should not have opened the book." Jake tried to scream, but no sound came out. His legs felt like lead, his body frozen in place. The figure stepped forward, and the shadows around him seemed to press closer, suffocating him. He reached out in desperation, slamming his hands against the walls, but they felt like stone. He was trapped in the dark with whatever this thing was. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished. The shadows receded, and the air cleared. The room was still. Jake blinked, trying to make sense of what had just happened, but everything was gone. The book, the figure, the oppressive feeling of being watched. He was alone again in that room, his breath ragged, his heart pounding. With shaking hands, he pushed open the door to the stairs and scrambled up them, not daring to look back. He ran through the bookstore, up the front stairs, and out the door into the night, not stopping until he was miles away. Jake never went back to that bookstore. He moved out of the city soon after, changed his phone number, and tried to forget everything that happened that night. But every now and then, he wakes up in the middle of the night, covered in sweat, hearing that whisper, "Let me out." And, even now, he wonders what would have happened if he hadn't touched the book. What would have happened if he'd just walked away? But some things he knows now should never be touched. Some doors should never be opened, and some books should stay closed.